hear that little tiny there? Makes me a little nervous. There's a way. There's a way. What? No, I think it's just I'm picking up a bunch of noise here. We'll see how this works. Like I said, it's just, what's that? It is different, Mike. I was going to try and put something different because I'm picking up so much other stuff. I'll find some place to put it where it won't quite get so. There's just nothing I can do about it. Everywhere I go, I get pops or scruffles. I'm not sure what to do. What do other preachers who move do? I don't know. I guess they have sound teams. That's what they have. All right, let me, give me a second. Why are you? No, that should work. There's no excuse here. Why are you not working? Well, it's going to be one of those nights. So, do I have any announcements, Victoria, while I'm stalling for time and dying here? Beg pardon? Could you give those announcements for me?
No.
When I say, do I have any announcements, I'm more like, do we have any announcements? I give you a microphone.
Give me a second because
I can't give you a second, but I can give you a microphone. Why are you not connecting, you crazy thing? I haven't changed anything. Let me just see where this thing connected to. And new.
Hi everybody, we have prayer circle upcoming on December 11th at 7 o'clock from 7 to 8 in a church. The previous one didn't go well, we had a triangle because shutdown of COVID shutdown, so we hope we will have more people than 3. Church decoration for Christmas will be happening on December 5th. On Saturday, what time? Probably 9 o'clock, right?
It's your call, babe.
The earlier we will start, the earlier we will finish. We have a Bible study on every Thursday at 7 p.m. in the loft, and we also have a Zoom option available for people who can't attend in person. That's about it.
Well, do you want to tell everybody about what the Bible study is about?
You can do it better.
But you can do it now. Yeah, there you go. Does anybody have a hard time understanding her? See? Okay, see? Well, honey, it's been 18 years. I haven't yet, so.
I didn't have any problem.
Okay, there we go. All right. Well done. And I'm back. All right. So I have one thing working here. So you don't want to tell them about the service, then you're going to make me do it. So we've been doing this thing where we're tying in with the sermons. We're doing, so last week was Bethlehem. I don't know what this week is, to be honest with you. But anyways, that's what we've been doing in the loft at 7 p.m. if you can make it, or Zoom in. Anyway, so that's it, and I got nothing else. So let's go ahead and get started. Lights, please. Would you use that microphone? I'm gonna keep it handy in case this thing doesn't work out. I'll shift. I'll do, all the cool preachers use the handhelds anyway. I pretend I'm Stephen Furtick on Diane. He uses a microphone. Diane's third favorite preacher. He used to be second, but he fell somehow. I don't remember how. But okay, so anyway, that story is something you guys don't know. So a couple years ago, actually, Rick Saccone gave a donation to the church for people to see sights and sounds. And I'm definitely ditching this. This thing's, I can hear it. It's working, but can't you hear the? No? You can't hear it. Sounds good. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so Rick gave a donation to the church for the sole purpose of taking, well, actually, it was supposed to be the youth, to Sights and Sounds, the Christian music theater in Latrobe, no, Lancaster, one of those L's. Anyway, so we all carpooled up, and Diane was in my car. And so we were driving up, and I kind of made a joke. I said, well, we should listen to something. I think I have one of my sermons here. We can listen to it, and everybody kind of groans in the car, especially my daughter was in the back, you know. Said, oh, no, okay, right, I won't make you listen to that. Try to find something good. I think I have a Stephen Furtick here. And Diane quickly says, oh, he's good. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I said, okay, Diane, I see. So since then it's been my joke that I'm her second favorite pastor. But she corrected me and said, he's fallen. I don't know what he did to Diane, but he did something that really, so he's all the way to 3 now. So anyway, sorry, Steve. So.
You've got to ask me.
No, don't ask her. She'll tell you the true story. I'll tell you the funny story. Which do you want to hear? Okay, so we're finishing. Oh, we're not finishing. We're moving on here. And by the way, I already know my first sermon for the new year, 2021 sermon. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's this thing called deconstructing the faith. Have you seen this? A lot of young Christians, but pretty prominent Christians are going through what they call deconstruction. And what that is basically they're backing out of their faith. They're deconstructing their faith. And I'm not too surprised, to be honest with you, because of the way Christianity has been taught for the past, couple decades. And it really kind of started in my generation. And so kind of a little bit of deconstruction. And I'm going to start a series in January called Reconstructing the Faith. And I actually think that they're doing the right thing by deconstructing, because what happens is, this is what happened to me, because I talk about this in my book. I'm a preacher's kid. I'm 3rd generation like that. My grandfather was a missionary. My father was a preacher. So I'm 3rd generation, and of course I was going to be a Christian, right? Because, what else are you going to do? And our culture was Christian then. In the 60s, when I was born, our culture was really still, it's kind of breaking away at that point, but it still was. And so I believed a lot of things without ever challenging them. And it isn't even that they weren't true, it's just I didn't know why they were true. And so even in my life, I went through this time, I didn't call it deconstruction, but a kind of a time where I was free fall a little bit, trying to figure out what was going on after my divorce, like what happened. I'm a good Christian kid, I shouldn't be getting divorced. And so that happens. And it happens because we accept things as a hand-me-down without ever really believing on our own. We kind of borrow somebody else's faith. That's a dangerous place to be. So we're going to talk about some of that. I'm going to start that after Christmas and the New Year's. I have a question to ask you all. So which I thought you would do, but you didn't. It's okay, I'll do it. Don't worry, I'm here for you, babe. We had a discussion what to do about the Saturday and Sunday after Christmas this year. So Christmas Eve's a Thursday. We're gonna have our normal double service there. The first service on Christmas Eve is our kind of modern service. We have skit guys and music will be provided again by the Fellowship of the Strings. It'll be live. And so then after that service, the next service is what we call our traditional, as traditional as we get. That just means that we have, again, music provided by the Fellowship of the Strings, and I'm going to preach. And I'm doing it because people actually said they want a sermon. I don't understand why, but people ask for a sermon, so you're getting it. So we're doing that. And then the next day, of course, is Christmas Friday. We will not be here. But the next day is Saturday again, and that's kind of quick turnaround after Christmas Eve and Christmas. So what I want to know, show of hands, I'm not going to hold you to this, how many of you believe you would come Saturday night if we have a regular church service Saturday night? Okay. Okay, you'll be here, of course. It's like me raising my hand. Okay. So not quite 50%. Okay, so it's kind of a lot to pack in a weekend. We're trying to decide whether or not we want to have service that weekend or not. The only time I think we've ever done it once when Christmas was actually on Sunday. We didn't do it, but anyway. So we'll look at that. I'm I'm in the Fellowship of the Strings that some of you know. Could you give me those lights on? Oh, wait, I might be able to have it here. I think my battery's still good. There you go. Thanks, that's good. Good, good. I'm out performing it. I've got it now. Thanks. I keep turning it down, you keep turning it up. The story of our marriage. Anyway, I'm in Fellowship of the Strings, so I'm singing and preaching and, maybe need to give my voice a break. We'll see. But anyway, that's TBD. We haven't decided yet. All right, so back to the sermon today. So we're going through Bethlehem, and it's been interesting because the first week we talked about the Messiah. Last week we talked about Mary and Joseph. We took them together. And this week we're going to talk about Bethlehem. And if I were going to preach a 6-part series on, this is really, Rabbi Sobel's kind of teaching on the Jewish king. I would have never picked these as my subjects. But what I'm doing is I'm taking his message that he gives, that we go through on Thursday night, and I'm taking something that kind of strikes me and kind of strikes my heart, and I'm kind of jumping off from there. There were a lot of really interesting things actually about the Bethlehem story. But first of all, it's kind of known to us as the city of David, because in a Christmas story, they're supposed to return to their home. They return to the city of David, it actually is called. David is an important person in the Bible. You know that because he has 2 cities named after him. Bethlehem is the city of David, and so is Jerusalem, the city of David. And Jerusalem's the city because when he became king, he united Israel, and he made Jerusalem the capital. Bethlehem was where he was born. So he was the 7th son of Jesse, and he grew up near Bethlehem. So he was a boy in Bethlehem. So that's his hometown, right? And so those are both considered the city of David, but we're going to focus on this one. And before I get to the Christmas story, there's a story that I shared, I think 2 years ago around Christmas time in the Bible that I always found fascinating and never fully understood it until I kind of started putting it together one Christmas. So let me show you this, and I'm going to give you the background of this. So David is a nobody in his own family. He's a 7th son. He is so unimportant that when Samuel, the prophet of God, comes to visit, they have dinner and they don't invite him. All right, that's how unimportant he is to his own household. He's stuck out with the sheep. Everybody else is invited. Unfortunately, what no one knew was Samuel was actually there to see David, and so they had to call him in from the sheep field. But that's how unimportant he was. And Jesse was a very unimportant family as well. And so just kind of a nobody. He went from there. He's anointed by Samuel that night, and he goes back to the sheep field for a few years. We don't know how many, but probably around 15 or 16 years old. He then is just delivering cheese and bread to his brothers who are in the front line of a war that's really going nowhere. You have these 2 armies facing off against each other for 40 days, not doing anything. And David shows up, and of course that's when Goliath issues his challenge, and David answers it in the most famous battle in history and wins. So David goes from being a nobody to be a celebrity. He is lauded by the entire country. He's given the princess's hand in marriage. He moves to the palace, and he goes from 0 to hero, like overnight. So that's where he is until Saul, the king, starts getting jealous of David, kind of realizing he's going to be taking over from him, and he tries to kill him. When that fails, because David has really good reflexes, he beat a bear, a lion, and Goliath, so his reflexes are really top notch. When that failed, he puts a price on his head to have him killed, and he actually sends hit squads out to try to catch him. And David spends the next about 10 years of his life running for it, trying to stay alive, running for his life. And he has a lot of kind of these episodic adventures. This would make a great series, by the way. David in his renegade years would make a great TV series because a lot of things happen to him when he's on the run. And he goes from being this boy who's on a run for his life and scared and actually makes some mistakes to slowly growing up, probably not slowly, probably very quickly growing up into the king he's supposed to be while he's on the run. And right towards the end of this 10-year period, as he develops himself into the king that God needs him to be, God starts providing people which join him. And we talked last week about how God puts the places, but then he pieces in places, then he breathes his spirit into it, brings it life. That's kind of a little bit what happens with David here too, because although David was very much alive, he wasn't a king yet, but he became a king while he was running. He really did. And so what happens is great warriors are drawn to him. Of course, he is a great warrior, and that's one of the reasons, but there's something more than that. there is something that God placed in the heart of these people, and they become known as David's Mighty Men, which I still think is a great rock band name. But anyway, so David's Mighty Men show up, and so there's 30 some of them, and they come together kind of from everywhere, right? And every one of them has these whole legendary tales about them. This one guy held off an entire Philistine army with like a shovel and a hoe in a lentil field, single-handedly, you know. Then there's Benaiah, the one who went into the pit on a wintry day and fought and killed a lion. You know, there's these amazing stories of these guys. And they're drawn to David because, like I said, well, part of it is he's a great warrior. He killed the giant. But also part of it is because God had put it in their heart to come. And what's actually happens is he gets surrounded by this core group of people who are totally dedicated to seeing him on the throne. And each one of them was mighty enough to rule a village, but they throw it all aside and pitch together with him. And so when he finally ascends the throne, he has his crew in place. And he's the first king who's able to unite Israel. And I think those 30-some guys are the reason why. No one wanted to mess with David. David was hard enough to mess with. He's surrounded by heroes, right? So right about the time this is going to come to a climax, David has worked his way back to his hometown. And I don't think this is an accident. We don't know where all he went. He spent a lot of time away from Israel. But when he comes back, he actually comes back to his hometown of Bethlehem, and I think he wants to see mom and dad. I mean, he's been on a run for a very long time. He's coming home, and I think he just wants to come home and see his relatives, you know, kind of a little bit of a get-together, a reunion with them. And he doesn't know, by the way, that it won't be much longer from here that he will become the crowned king on the throne. He doesn't know that. But I just think he's just a little bit lonely, and he returns home, and that's where we're going to pick up the story here in 2 Samuel. So he is in what they call the stronghold. Now there's some caves, and then there's this thing they call the stronghold, which is probably like a natural rock formation or something on a plateau. Or maybe it was built by some empire. But there's this thing called the stronghold. So David was in the caves hiding, but as the men show up and he ends up getting his army, they move out to the stronghold where they can kind of see the area. And this is near the valley of Rephaim. And the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. So this is kind of an interesting thing because they shouldn't be there. Bethlehem's in Israel. Israel has a king and a standing army to keep people like the Philistines out of places like Bethlehem. But Saul isn't doing his job anymore. He really isn't. And in fact, David's acting more as a king by now than Saul is. And so David comes out and he's looking across this field that he probably used to walk through with his sheep and his flute and his staff. And it's littered with Philistines who shouldn't be there. And he sees this city. He's so close, but he can't go to it because these Philistines are separating him from it. And he says this, "Oh, if someone could get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." And this is a gate he probably passed by every morning and came back. Well, he didn't come back every night, but many nights he spent with the sheep outside. But he would lead his sheep out past that, and they'd get drinks for the sheep. And while that was there, he'd fill up his water, and he would drink it. But boy, when he came back, after being out in the field with the sheep and kind of dry and dirty, and he'd pick up that water, he'd drink it. In his mind, it's probably the sweetest, best tasting water he's ever had in his life. I don't know if you have a spot like that in your home or in your life, you know. I remember I got a drink from there. Oh, it was so great, you know. There's this one fountain in our school growing up. There's just one that was just so great. I could drink it all day long. There's just something, you know. And David has is about this well near the gate of Bethlehem, and he's just kind of says it out loud, what I would give. Forget seeing mom and dad. I know, but if I could just have a drink from that well of Bethlehem, if somehow I could have it. Here's the problem. David's become a king, and David is surrounded by loyal men. And when he just said, boy, that'd be great, they heard as a longing in the heart of their king. And those guys must have looked at each other and says, we can't put him on the throne, but by God, we can give him a drink from the well of Bethlehem. And so that's what happens. Three of the mighty warriors, and this is insane, broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from it, and carried it back to David. So they went, in the middle of the night, they went through the lines like they were nothing. The entire garrison of Philistines, oh yeah, well, we're the mighty men, who cares? They got through them, they get this water, they come back from them, both ways, never seen. They don't even know they were there. 3 guys, they fill it up, and they bring it back to David. Now, if Hollywood were to make a movie and actually try to do this scene, they do it all wrong. Because at the next moment, what you would think as they come back to David is David's going to see this. He's going to come out and give this big speech, and everybody's going to, probably pound their shields with their swords and stuff, and yay, and he's going to drink it in front of everybody, and they're going to, just go nuts, maybe go down the hill and attack the Philistines, because this is what happens in a Hollywood movie. But that's not what happens in the Bible. What happens next, I never understood. Because these guys just risked their lives for a stinking drink of water. That meant nothing really, honestly, except to show David, you command it, we'll do it, right? And so they go and again, they bring it back to David. And the next verse in the Bible I've never understood is this. But David refused to drink it. What? Like, what, are you going to put it in something and keep it? No, he says this. Instead, watch this, he poured it out. He pours it on the ground. Like, this is like, David, what are you doing? But watch what he says. He says to God, because he's pouring this out in what's known as a drink sacrifice, right? And you won't find it very much in the Bible, although Paul references this later. He says later when he's dying, he says, I'm being poured out like a drink sacrifice. So he says, he's talking to God. He says, far be it from me, Lord, to do this. I can't, he says. Is this not the blood of the men who risked their lives? This is like their blood brought back to me. They risked their lives for this. I can't accept this gift. It's too great. I'm going to take their gift and I'm going to offer it to God for all of us. It is so precious. I can't possibly drink it. It's too precious. And he offers it to God, and David would not drink it. So I'm like, wow, it's interesting, And the men loved him for it. They were not insulted at all. They went, yes, let's make this an offering to God. It's such a great offering. We're going to offer it to God. Okay. All right. And remember now, they gave blood sacrifices in those days. So he says, this is like their blood. We're offering it to God. And he doesn't say if he's offering for atonement or just thanksgiving or what, but he's offering it. So he's letting everybody know a couple things. First of all, these guys are brave, and he receives that. But also, ultimately, we're here for God. It isn't my kingdom, it's God's kingdom. But here's the interesting thing to me. In those days, as we see here, the garrison is in Bethlehem. So the Philistines, their enemies, have come in and kind of taken the city. Well, in those days, they had concentric walls. They'd have a wall outside, like, little thing, and then as you got closer to the actual city, the walls got bigger and thicker. And what would often happen was you'd have these walls that are kind of kept out, the riffraff. But when an army approached, people would leave those and go to the inner walls because it was safer there. And probably, we don't know, there's nothing in the Bible that tells it, but probably when the Philistines first approached, everybody who lived in the outer ring moved into the inner walls of Bethlehem. That's what would have happened. They probably boarded it up. And because they're garrisoned there, and there's no mention of things being burnt or anything, probably what happened was they negotiated a peace treaty with the Philistines to let them come in, and they'd have to pay them some kind of a payment. The Israel's paid Philistines some kind of payment because Saul wasn't coming. They had to deal with it themselves. That's probably what happened. But here's my point. My point is Bethlehem used to probably be here, but it became here. So David's here, right? Follow me. So what's going on here is David pours this out, and we know he's somewhere near caves. See, the reason I say that is because some part of Christian churches believe that the stable, which is actually never mentioned in the Bible mentions a manger but not a stable, was actually a cave. In fact, you can go to Israel and they'll take you to one of the places they think Jesus was born. It's a cave. Wouldn't it be something if the cave we're talking about is the cave that David came out of? And just about the place he poured that drink offering is where Jesus Christ was born. I'm telling you, it was close. It was somewhere around there. And I think that David made an offering and God answered. I think God said, yep, I'm coming back with my answer to this. I'm going to give you the land that takes away the sin of the world. So that is the city of David's birth. Okay, now let's connect it back up to Jesus. Like I said, it's going to happen where Jesus is going to be born, almost the exact spot he pours this water. Joseph went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David. Now this was something that Rabbi Sobel brought out that I did not know. Nazareth, the root word for Nazareth is Nazrit. And that means shoot, like a bud or shoot off of a plant. You know how you give a little time like a plant and it grows out of the vine? That's what that means. And so what they believe is that Nazareth was actually an offshoot of Bethlehem. In other words, Bethlehem under the Davidic Empire, which lasted for longer than David was alive, his sons would take over from there. It was so populous that the Bethlehem grew so much that they had to kind of move out from there to settle a new place, and they called that Nazareth because it was an offshoot. Nazareth was an offshoot of Bethlehem. Why does that matter? Do you guys know the song, O Come, Emmanuel? Do you know the second verse of O Come, Emmanuel? O rod of Jesse, come. I always thought that meant something like a club, but rod actually means shoot. And he's actually talking about a shoot, an offshoot, an offspring, whatever, of Jesse. Jesse was David's father. So he's actually kind of saying that this is going to be from, and this is Isaiah, by the way. This is a prophecy in Isaiah. He's saying that this little shoot's going to come out from Jesse, which is Bethlehem, which means the shoot would be Nazareth. And he's going to go back to the root, which is Bethlehem. So both of those prophecies are going to be fulfilled. I can't remember how many. There's over 1,000 different prophecies that point to the Messiah. And when you look at them all, they can only point to Jesus. It's like a 1 in 15 billion chance or something, kind of a thing. So this is one of the many little details in the Bible where he's pointing to the fact that the shoot, the rod is going to be Nazareth. It's going to move back to Bethlehem. So he comes back because he belonged to the house and the line of David, so he had to go back to Bethlehem. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. By the way, we looked this up in Bible study. In today's world, by car, it takes you about 2 hours to get from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Have you guys ever actually made that specific trip from Nazareth to Bethlehem? Yeah, you guys may be making stops and things. I don't know how long it takes on a donkey, but a lot more than two. But anyway, but it is nearby. I always thought it was far, far, far away. That's the Wiseman came far, far away. They actually were right next door. So he was pledged. She was expecting a child. Now, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Most people believe they didn't go to an inn, actually. They went to a relative's house, but the guest room was taken. Seems unlikely they wouldn't have had relatives there. But anyway, that's what they say. So this translation actually says guest room, not inn. When I grew up, there was always an innkeeper yelling at them. There probably wasn't such a person. It was probably a relative, maybe yelled at them, but probably a relative. And they showed up there and said, "Oh, sorry, there's so many people here. The guest room's taken." And then they said, "Well, we have the place where we keep our manger." And some people believe it's a cave nearby. Okay, anyway, so Bethlehem. What does Bethlehem mean? We said that Nazareth's root. What does Bethlehem mean? Well, Bethlehem literally means city of bread. And I know that gets some people excited.
This is the joy for me. I love bread.
We all do Oprah, settle down. Okay, we all love bread, right? The city of bread. What a weird place to have the Messiah born. I mean, it's David's, right? But God named it. He named it before David was born. So God could have called it whatever he wanted, but he named it the city of bread. Bethel actually means house of God. I mean, that would be kind of a nice place, I think, to have the Messiah born, the house of God. That's okay. There's so many really cool different places that he could have been born, but God arranged it so he was born in the house of bread. What is up with this whole bread thing? Well, the thing is that bread is extremely important in the Bible. In fact, bread is probably one of the number one metaphors God uses to teach us about the relationship he wants to have with us. He uses it over and over again in the Bible. I'm going to walk through a couple of them and show you a couple of the ways that bread is used and what it means, especially in that culture. Because, in those days, if you broke bread with somebody, that was an expression. I broke bread with them. Or the other thing was share salt and bread. That was a thing. Then you would expect them not to turn on you. right? You thought you could trust them. He sat at my table and broke bread with me. That was a big deal. If you then were treacherous to that person, they would be astonished, and other people would look at you like you were just, what, who? You broke bread with them. You can't do that, right? So in that culture, bread was a real big thing. Now remember, God plans everything. So it's not God looked and said, oh, that culture likes bread, huh? No, he made sure the culture liked bread so that he could use bread as a metaphor to teach them about how he wanted to interact with them. So let me show you, this is of course a very famous, I don't think there's an infamous, actually, miracle of Jesus. This is one of them, one of the famous ones. And we've seen this is the John account. A large crowd of people followed him, Jesus. They'd seen the signs he had been done. And I want you to remember this. They have seen the signs that he has done by healing sick people. Well, I'd follow that person too, right? I mean, if you knew that he could heal the sick, I mean, even if I weren't sick, I'd go to him. You know, can I get just a touch of your hand before I get sick so I never get sick or something? I would be following him. I just want to see it. You know, I'd want to see cripples walk. That'd be cool. And so they're following him. So he went up a mountainside, and there he sat down with his disciples, and the Jewish Passover feast was near. Now, this is not the final Passover feast he has, but this is that time of the year. So Jesus looked up and he saw a large crowd coming towards him. He turns to Philip and says, where can we buy bread for all these people to eat? Now, he asked this only to test Philip because he already knew what he was going to do. And Philip freaks out. He's like, we don't have enough money to buy bread for all these people. But Jesus wanted him thinking about that problem. They're coming right now. They're hungry. Where are we going to get the money? How can we? Where can we even buy? Forget the money. Where can we even get enough bread for all these people? And Philip says, there's no way. And another disciple looks and says, Andrew says, well, there's a boy here with 5 small loaves of barley bread, and he also has 2 small fish. So basically, you know, think about it as a Lunchable. You know, there's like little crackers in it. You know, this is barely bigger than that, right? So this boy, give this little boy some credit, boy. That man, that boy came prepared, you know. His mom probably said, take something to eat. Oh, Ma, take it. Okay, you know, gets out there and, well, I have this. So, but how far could that possibly go in such a large crowd? And Jesus says, have the people sit down. Now, there was plenty of grass. They didn't have his bread. So they all sat down. About 5,000 men were there, and they always say that, you know, you take the men and you multiply it by 2. Like, you know, it's like 15,000 people, I think, women and children. So they sat down, and about 5,000 men were there, and Jesus took the loaves and gave thanks. Now, we know what's going to happen, right, because we've seen the movies. We know exactly what happens next here. And he handed the bread to those who were seated, and he gave them as much as they wanted, and he did the same with the fish. So he gets his disciples, take this all out. And when all of them had had enough to eat, Jesus spoke to his disciples, gather the leftover pieces, don't waste anything. You know, he's a good Jew, you don't waste anything. And so they gathered what was left over from the 5 barley loaves, and they filled 12 baskets with the pieces left by those who had eaten. Okay, a couple things. Did you notice that the Bible dropped the fish out of the account? Like the fish were just there. Okay, the fish are there for you to eat with your bread. This is really a story about the bread. So the question comes up, because if you get caught up on numbers, and by the way, Jews love numbers. They do. And Rabbi Sobel's all over the place with the numbers. When you take a look at these things, 5, it was very specific, not a bunch, not about a half a dozen, it's 5. Why 5? What Rabbi Sobel put forth, this is as good as anything, I don't know, is there are 5 books of the law. The Torah is 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And I think this is interesting. And at first I thought, wow, and then I thought, no, this is actually perfect. Because remember we talked a couple weeks ago about how Moses and the law could bring you to the promised land, but only Yeshua could take you into the promised land, right? So, you know, this is a completion of what Moses started. So if you think about 5 loaves of bread as being representative of the Torah, what's Jesus saying? It's not enough. What has to happen to it? We have to multiply it. Right? Jesus takes it and multiplies it exponentially. He takes the law and he feeds them all with it, right? They have 12 baskets, 1 for each disciple to take with them if they wanted, with pieces left over, okay? So that's really cool. So now we know that this is a very, very important miracle because it's in the Bible. And later on, Jesus leaves them. He goes up with his, it's a whole walking on the water thing, and gets away with them, and they talk for a while. And then they come back, and the people see him on the other side of this lake, and they all go running. Those people, because they've been fed, they go running to catch up with him on the other side, right? And so the next day, we pick this story up. The next day, here's what happens. The people saw the signs that Jesus did, and they said to themselves, watch, this must be the prophet who is supposed to come into the world. So the people who saw him reproduce, take the 5 breads and make it enough to feed 5,000, they said, this has to be the prophet. How is bread a sign of the prophet? Now, they're not saying that because he healed the sick. They're not saying that because the blind were seeing and the lame were dancing. The things that I would think, the lepers cleansed, I was saying, oh, surely he's the prophet. No, that's not what did it. When they talked about the bread amongst themselves, it says, clearly this is the prophet who is supposed to be sent to us. The bread. Of all the things, the bread. And I don't mean to minimize bread. I like bread as much as the next, well, maybe not as much as my wife, but much of most people. And I love bread, but that just seems to me a bit much. But we see this. And so when God is taking the Israelites out of Egypt, right? What does he do? And we looked at this in the Bible study. So the Deuteronomy tells us their sandals don't wear out and their robes never go to tatters in the entire time they're in the wilderness. So God can take something and make it last forever. We see him do this with oil and the flour with Elijah. So we've seen him do this. He could have given them all a kit, and in that kit you open up and you take something out and you eat it, and you open up and there's still more there, right? He could do that. God's capable of doing that. But he doesn't. In other words, he can make their kit never wear out the same way their sandals aren't wearing out, the same way their robe isn't wearing out. He could have, but instead, he feeds them every day with something called manna. And for those of you who don't know, the word manna means, what is it? It's literally what it means. Because they want the first time I said, manna. Manna. That's what they're saying. What is it? What is it? Manna. Manna. That's what it is. It's manna, right? They had no idea what it was. And they fed them with it every day. So that every day they came out, and it's not really bread. We call it bread of heaven, but it's really not. It must have been amazing stuff because you could cook it, boil it, fry it, dice it, slice it, whatever you want to do with it. You can do anything with that stuff and make food from it. But it's not really bread, even though we call it bread of heaven. But he does this. He feeds them every day with this, and you could only gather enough for that day. If you tried to steal more, it would spoil on you, because every day he needed them looking to heaven for something they didn't understand for their provision. Right? That's what he does. And we see that, and that's part of Jehovah Jireh, which is God will provide. And one of the very first things that God ever wants to teach you is, I'll provide for you. I'll provide for you. Jehovah Jireh, I think, is the number one thing God teaches every new believer. And believe me, if you get Jehovah Jireh, the rest of it gets easier. If you don't get Jehovah Jireh, you're never going to trust him with the rest of it. God knows you. He created you. And Psalm says this. He says, he commanded the clouds above, opened the doors of heaven, and rained manna down for them to eat, and given them of the bread of heaven. Men ate angels' food. He sent them food to the full. In other words, they ate so much, they had nothing left. They didn't need anything else. But bread of heaven is not really the manna. Jesus tells us this. He picks up from Deuteronomy. When he's quoting to Satan, he quotes Deuteronomy. He said, he humbled you, allowed you to hunger, and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor your fathers knew, that what? He might make you know that man shall not live by bread alone, but lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God. That's why he used manna. He used manna to say, look, you know bread. Pharaoh provides you bread. I'm providing you manna. You don't know what it is, but it's going to take care of you. You're going to be full, and you're going to be fine, because every word of the Lord is what you need to be looking for. Stop focusing on the things I'm going to take care of anyway. Just go ahead and let us do this. So Jesus says this to them. This is amazing to me. What I'm about to tell you is true. It is not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven. It was my Father who gave you the true bread of heaven. The bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven, he who gives life to the world. And they said, well, what sign are you going to give us? What will you do this we can see and believe you? Long ago, our people ate manna in the desert. Sure, it was written in Scripture that the Lord gave them bread to eat. And Jesus says this really amazing thing to them. He says that, and I don't have a scripture here. Give me a Bible. For some reason, I don't have that. Give me John chapter 6. I can't believe I don't have that scripture here. Thanks. Now if I can read it in this light. Okay. You know, I might need the other Bible. This is awful small here. No. Dun, dun, dun. It is not, I can't see this. Boy, this is going to make good video, isn't it? That's okay. Yeah. Okay, I can't find it in this Bible right now. You're going to take my word for it. I'll put it, I swear to you, if you watch tomorrow's sermon, it'll be in the slides. Jesus actually says to them this. He says, you don't believe in me because of the miracles I did. You believe me because I fed you. It's in there. If you want to look up the NSB, I promise you it's in there. He says, this you need to know. You're not following after me right now because of the signs. You're following me because I fed you. That's an astonishing thing to me. But this is what he's saying. It doesn't matter how many miracles I perform. That's not going to keep you following me. Here's what will keep you following me. That I give you what you need and I take care of you, right? Another way to put it is this. Relationships are not built on mountaintops experience. They're built day by day. Now, I'm divorced, as I said before, and I have a daughter. And when I got divorced, I don't know if this is still the case, but when I got divorced, it was almost a standard agreement that the father gets every other weekend and Wednesdays. So that was it. You know, this is it. And I said, well, I don't like that. And so I had to give up a lot to get 50% of time because I was fighting from a bad position. That's the way it was. But this has given rise to something that a lot of women are very bitter about, that you may have heard the expression. It's given rise to the Disneyland dad. Have you ever heard the expression, the Disneyland dad? The idea is this, is that dad comes in once every other weekend, takes the kids out to some exotic place, you know, gets them all hopped up on sugar and these great times, and then sends them home to mom, right? And so all the fun dad gets to do with them. You know, he takes them to the ball games, the football games, the hockey games. He does all this stuff, and mom gets them Sunday night, and Monday morning has to wake them up and get them to go to school, and Monday night has to make them do their homework, right? So mom gets to make them eat their Brussels sprouts and do their homework, and dad just comes in, hey, where do you want to go today? Let's go to Six Flags, and off they go, right? And so a lot of people are very bitter about that because, well, this isn't even fair. No wonder my kids love him. You know, he's always doing fun things with them, and I'm the one doing all the hard things with him. But the reality is that although that seems unfair, the reality is, having lived now and seen it and having done counseling, the one that children love the most when they graduate from high school is the mom, not the dad. The one who is there every day. The stuff that seems like they would hate you for, they actually learn to love and respect you for. And when you hear valedictorians stand up and give speeches and they're from a broken home, it's always, and from my mother who sacrificed so I could have this opportunity. So you know, she had worked 2 jobs so that my brothers and I, you always hear those speeches. You never hear them say, and for my dad who took me out every other week and we had fun, you never hear that speech, right? It's always the one who is there day by day in the trenches with them, even though sometimes it didn't seem like fun. That's the one the kids end up growing up to respect. And if there's one they want to be like, it's that one, not the one who only breezed in, because we all recognize how easy it is to take kids to Disneyland and have a good time. It's hard to invest the day-by-day thing. Another way I could put it is this: love is not formed by eating cake together. It's formed by breaking bread together. See, God knows this. God knows that the miracles that he performs are like cake. Oh, it's amazing. It's just, wow. Did you see that fire from heaven fall? Did you know that person used to be lame and now is walking? That's one thing. But what really builds your walk with the Lord is the day-by-day stuff. And sometimes I meet Christians who are always chasing the mountaintop. You know, they're always after that next mountaintop experience. And mountaintops are fun. I love Disneyland, by the way. But although that's fun, that's not where relationships are built. And if we're going to have a relationship with God that he wants, we have to understand that he made bread the symbol of it, not cake. The purpose of God's bread is not to feed you. The purpose of God's bread is to strengthen you. And he's not trying to excite you and entice you with bread. He's trying to feed you so that you can grow strong. And in fact, I would say that if you're not strengthened by God's bread, maybe you're playing with your food. In fact, we know that bread to God is not just physical bread. He also wants to feed you with his word. And he wants to strengthen you with his word. And this isn't done miraculously once a week or once every other week or some huge, we'll have a revival, we'll get a tent, we'll do that, it'll be great. And there's nothing wrong with tent revivals unless you're passing out snakes. That's not good. But if just regular tent revivals, those are fine. Nothing wrong with those. But if we don't get the day-by-day stuff right, if we don't break bread with God and look to him to provide us all of our needs, we're not building the relationship that we need to build with him. So, going back here. So going back to Jesus for a second. So what happens after this? I'm still going through the book of John here. What happens later is Jesus goes out of his way to meet the woman at the well. Somewhere about 21 miles out of his way to meet with this woman at the well. She's a Samaritan woman, not even Jew. And he gets her all excited about him being the Messiah, and he's come, and she goes running off. Like she can't wait to tell everybody. And like Jesus is watching her, you just picture, and he sent his disciples away. And the TV show The Chosen does a real good job on this, He sends them away because he knows he has to meet with her in private because they're going to talk about things that she wouldn't want anybody else to know. And so he sends them away, and they come back, and they're all eating, drinking, and say, did anybody bring anything for Jesus? Well, I can't believe we didn't bring any food for Jesus. And he's sitting there, he's smiling and happy, right? And he's watching this woman get running away, all excited because the Messiah has come, which fills his heart with joy. And they come up to him and say, the disciples say, you should eat something. And he says to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. And they all look at each other. Well, did you give him a sandwich? I don't know. They're like talking about, did you slip up some bread? I don't know. Did anybody give him? No. And Jesus, no, you understand. My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish the work he gave me. So he's saying, this feeds me. What feeds me is doing God's work and taking the words that he gives me and actually doing them. To translate this will of the Lord in heaven to earth, that feeds me. If I have that, I'm okay. I'm absolutely fine. And so this is the connection between God and bread. Do you see why Jesus came from the house of bread? You see how important bread is to his ministry? Because he's always using this as a means of saying, well, you understand bread. Everybody understands bread. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody understands it. It's so easy. You can touch it. You can break it. You can feel it. You can smell it. Oh, baking bread smells wonderful, right? Everybody understands bread. That's why God uses it so much. He wants to connect with us. And so he's connecting with them. He says, look, here's the bread. Bread's the word that comes from the Lord. Bread is what feeds you. Bread is what builds our relationship. We break bread together when I provide it for you. And this builds our relationship. But there's one other thing he uses, well, actually a couple of things. One other thing I want to talk about here, and that is, and this is really weird, but stick with me, the connection between bread and forgiveness. Because he actually says that to partake of this bread, you need to forgive others. Right? Because he says, in fact, I am the bread, I am the bread of the world. I am the bread of life. And he comes to, he offers it to you, but this means that you're a follower of hers, which means you have to forgive. In fact, in the Lord's Prayer, these two go together, right, in the same prayer. Right? What does he say? Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Right there in the prayer. It puts them together. Daily bread, sure. Manna from heaven, absolutely. God wants to provide for you. Yes, he does. And he'll forgive you your sins the same way you forgive the person who sinned against you. So he uses bread to understand his provision for you. And once you understand that, he says, okay, now I need you to understand this. This bread means that you forgive that person the way I forgave you. Still want it? See? That's what he does. And he puts this together. He puts it together there, and it even gets put together in the final act that he gives of the Last Supper that we didn't get to do this year, but every year we celebrate Passover because we want to see exactly the way Jesus does it. And this is Paul talking about it. The Lord Jesus, on the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "Take, eat. This is my body," the bread, the one who came from the house of bread. "This is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same manner, he also took the cup after dinner, saying, "This cup is the new covenant of my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Therefore, whoever eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of the bread and drink of the cup." And then Paul ends up by saying this, "For he who eats and drinks this in an unworthy manner eats and drinks judgment to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. For this reason, many of you are sick and weak among you." He puts them together. What does it mean to take the bread and the cup in an unworthy manner? Well, he told us, "Forgive us our sins as you forgive those who sin against you." So many Christians have a hard time with that. I mean, not just Christians, humans have a hard time forgiving people. It's not easy. I used to be better at it. Then we opened a church. I seem to be worse now than I was before. I don't know why. But it's sometimes a process, you know. You have to keep forgiving. It's like, okay, forgive, okay, keep forgiving. I thought I forgave, but I didn't. And the one the little litmus test I always give, people say, "Well, I don't know if I forgave them." Well, do this then. This will tell you in a second if you've forgiven them or not. Today, when you pray, don't just pray to forgive them. Pray that God will bless them. And see how you do with that. And really mean it. God, I just want you to bless them. I want you to give them whatever their heart's desires. I just want you to bless them. If you can really pray that for somebody, you forgive them. Because it's really, really hard to see somebody you did not forgive get blessed. It's very, very difficult. And so this is what we're saying. We're saying that, yes, God provides for us. Absolutely, God provides for us. He wants you to know that. He wants you to know that he came here to provide for you. He wants you to start looking to him. Look to me, he says, not to Pharaoh. Look to me, and I'll provide for you. I'm going to take care of you. We're going to break bread together. We're going to share special moments together because I'm going to provide for you in all the ways. In ways you don't understand. That's what manna means. In ways you don't understand, I want to take care of you. I'm going to provide for you. But understand that I'm doing this because I've forgiven you. And since you follow me, you're going to be like me, and you're going to forgive others. And if you can't do that, this isn't working. That's what Jesus actually says. He actually says that if you forgive others, I will forgive you. And if you don't forgive others, then neither will I forgive you. It's one of those things that just isn't preached very much anymore because we all just think, God's a crazy cat lady that just loves us, and no matter what we do, he still loves us. But it's not that way. He actually says, no, this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to change you, and you're going to become like me, and here's what I'm like. I forgive people. Can you do that or not? We see in Romans the very famous, one of the top 10 misquoted verses in the Bible. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God. And we always like to stop it there. Everything works together for our good and his glory. And that's on coffee mugs and calendars. Everything works. And I hear people aren't even Christians say that. Everything works out for the best. Man, where do you live? I haven't seen that in my life. Everything always works out for the best. But in Romans, he actually puts that little bit at the end of it that really makes this verse different. To those who are called according to his purpose. So he says, if I give you a purpose and I call you into that purpose, you're going to screw up. It's okay, I'll take care of you. God is greater than my mistakes. Spirit Chapel wouldn't be still here if God were not greater than my mistakes, because I've made them. I continually make them, right? But he's greater than my mistakes. I can make mistakes as long as I'm called according to his purpose. I got that. Yeah. I got this. Don't worry. I knew you were going to do that. I got this, right? Everything's going to work out okay for those who are called according to his purpose. This whole thing is kind of tied in there. So God provides for us so we will have strength to do his will. And this is what we're supposed to be looking forward to. This is what we're supposed to be fighting for. This is what we're supposed to be trying to get to. More than anything else, this is what we want. We want to break bread with Jesus Christ. Right? We want to sit down with him and have him break that bread and hand it to you. Because you're part of this family. Right? That's what I want. He says, I want you there with me while I'm breaking bread and handing it out. And we're going to break bread together. And that means that you can trust me. In fact, Revelation, this is what I'll close with, has this great verse. The angel said to me, write this down. Blessed are those who are at the feast of the wedding of the supper of the Lamb. And then he added this, these are the true words of God. The word came to us that we may live like him and join him at his supper table. Would you all please pray with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you that you see beyond what we are and you see what we can be. And I pray that you will take us into a new journey with you, the one that you want. Let us break bread with you, Lord. Let us take it from your hand, your nail-pierced, scarred hand. And remember what it cost you to offer us that bread. And let us repay in kind to those who need it. Let us forgive those as you have forgiven us. For I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.